All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Memorial Day virtual chocolate tasting experience. Thanks for participating in the poll. As you could see from the summary of all the answers, it looks like the majority of you are coming in from the Southwest and the West Coast, with a nice percentage coming from the Midwest too. So thank you for that. I'm Lisa Vanderson, and I'm the Marketing and PR Manager here at Ethel Chocolates. And I just wanted to thank you for joining us on this unofficial kickoff to summer. I think we're all so excited to get outside, but there's still a little bit of concern with that. So we're all staying in, and we appreciate you joining us. That is the one thing too that's a little bit different about this experience tonight versus if you did it with us at our tasting room in Las Vegas or California. Normally, we'd all be in the same room, having the same experience, talking and laughing, but we are still here at FLM practicing social distancing. So I'm at my home in Las Vegas, and the other folks on the phone and the Zoom are at their home in Las Vegas, and you'll see them here soon. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. You probably had a chance to read these while we were waiting for everyone to join, but we love questions and we love to hear from you. But we won't be able to answer those in real time because we found from the other two experiences that we've done that we have so many questions, it's just almost impossible to keep up. So what we would like to say is go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and we'll try to answer those at the end of the experience. Please do not use the raise hand or chat functionality at the bottom of your screen because, again, we just don't have enough people to monitor and manage that right now. And the next part is just, we love to see you, but again, we can't because we're not together. And we did want to mention that we have you muted and your video turned off only because we're hoping to ensure the best experience for everyone and keep it quiet and distraction free. But if you do choose to post pictures on social media, we would love to see those and would ask that you give us a tag with @EthelMChocolates. And we will be scouring the internet for those tonight and randomly selecting one winner to receive a free upcoming virtual tasting. So we really would love to see us on your feed and tagged out there. And then finally, we wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying these, we have scheduled 2 more out into the future. So if you need a Father's Day gift or a graduation gift, we have a dark chocolate tasting experience. So that's all dark chocolate pieces. That'll be happening on June 5th. And then we have a Father's Day tasting that we're pairing with beer this time. We'll also have wine recommendations, but we're also going to send out beer recommendations to pair with that. And that'll be happening on Friday night, June 19th. So before we dive into the chocolate, just a couple of things I wanted to tell you about our company in case you're not as familiar. So we, as Ethel Chocolates, were founded in 1981 by Forrest Mars Sr., and there's a portrait of him in the upper left-hand corner. Forrest retired from the M&M Mars company in 1981, and that's the company that we all know and love. He had built that with his father, and he decided to move west because he was in search of a better climate. So Forrest moved out here to right outside of Las Vegas in Henderson. He built our store and our factory, which you can see a picture in the middle of our store. And he started creating chocolates that he and his mother made when he was a child growing up in Tacoma, Washington. So that was really his sole purpose, was let's get to the handcrafted, freshly made chocolates that I know I can make really well and sell to the public. So in addition to creating the store and the factory here on site, Forrest also bought several acres of land and started the foundation for what is now our 3-acre botanical cactus garden. And you can see a picture of it here in the upper right-hand corner in full bloom, which is a pretty recent photo because it's spring here. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's open to the public year-round and it's free. And it's just a really neat sight to be seen. And the next picture, if you keep moving down, is how we decorate it during the holidays. So this is quite nice if you're ever in the area or you're making a trip to Las Vegas. I would definitely say put us on your list for the holidays. We take over 1 million LED lights and we wrap those around the palm trees and the cacti and all the other bushes. And we make this amazing magical forest of lights that is, again, free and open to the public. And it's become so popular. We have people coming from near and far to see it. And if you're familiar with the show Tanked on Animal Planet, they actually called us last year and came and filmed and built us our own tank to have on site here. So it's pretty neat. And then the final picture is a little bit about us and how sustainability is very critical to us. Forrest also had gathered some land right outside the factory that was dedicated to building a solar garden. So it's 4 acres, and we produce enough power there with all the sunshine in our state to to run the factory during peak production hours. So we're really serious about our commitment to sustainability and building the world tomorrow that we want today. So starting now. So you can feel good about eating a piece of chocolate that's delicious as well as good for the environment. So I am going to turn this over to Mark Mackey, the moment you've all been waiting for. Mark chocolatier. He's also in research and development here at Ethel Chocolates, and he comes to us from the Culinary Institute of America in New York. Most impressive to me is that Mark holds a US and international patent for his work on improvements to the texture and shelf life of chocolate. So I would just ask you to sit back, relax, think of questions. We will be taking those at the end, and enjoy your time with us.
Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? My name is Mark Mackey, and I'm excited to be with all of you again tonight for our 3rd chocolate tasting. You know, we've been doing these a few times now, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of switch things up a little bit. So let's start right off with a piece of chocolate. How does that sound? Let's reach out. How about we'll grab this piece here. This is our milk, I won't tell you what it is, but it's a milk chocolate piece that's got a little bit of a dark chocolate drizzle on top. Everybody pick that up. So during our tasting tonight, we're not just going to be eating delicious chocolate, but we're going to be using all of our senses to evaluate each piece, from everything that we're seeing to smell to taste, and also texture and aftertaste as well, and how it melts in our mouth. So let's look at this piece here. So what do we see? We see it looks like a delicious piece covered in a milk chocolate. We call that in the industry, it's enrobed. So it's a nice enrobed piece here. And then it's got a nice little dark chocolate drizzle on that. It might add a little bit more bitterness to the piece, and maybe a little texture as well from that drizzle. So let's pick it up, and let's kind of smell it a little bit. You know, sometimes I like to rub the side or the back of the piece, find a nice flat surface. And that's going to melt and soften the chocolate a little bit and kind of activate a few of those aroma compounds. Let's bring it up to our nose and smell. Breathe deep, and you should be getting some of those really delicious, milky, caramelized sugar, a little cocoa, obviously. Really nice flavor aromas that are coming out of this. And maybe just a little bit of perfuminess coming through as well. And that gives us maybe a little hint of what we're going to try. Now let's go ahead and take a bite. See that really nice, bright red center there. Right away, we're going to get tart red fruit. Raspberry flavor is very, very prominent. And then some of that milk chocolate is going to melt and add some richness, a little creaminess. I'm going to cut that sweetness a little bit, add a little complexity. Get more of those floral notes. Some of that caramelized sugar. And maybe a little bit of that bitterness too from the dark chocolate on the drizzle there. So if you haven't already guessed, this is our milk chocolate raspberry satin cream, and you know, it's one of my favorite pieces. And you know what makes it really unique? We'll talk about it in a little bit, but we use Oregon raspberries in the center of that piece, and it really, you know, is really clear with that really bright tart flavor that you're tasting there in the center. All right, let's take a look down at our placemat. Hopefully you have your placemat in front of you. Let's look down here at this section. This is where we have our aroma and flavor wheel. All right. So what we're going to be doing tonight when we taste, we're going to be looking at that aroma wheel and flavor wheel. You know, that has a lot of the aromas and flavors that are found in chocolates. And what you might find is that you'll see some common elements, things that are floral, spicy, maybe roasty, dairy notes. And then you'll see some things in the earthy category that might kind of strike you, a little differently. Like, oh, maybe, I'm tasting some wood or leather. That may not be something I always want to taste in chocolate. And it's, where while you may not necessarily want your chocolate to taste like all of that, you'll have a little bit of leather maybe, or tobacco, and some of those earthy notes that can kind of augment your tasting experience and provide, some background complexity that can help to elevate some of those other notes. So it's something that we want to kind of take into consideration when we're tasting all of the different pieces, and things that are more primary flavors and aromas, and then things that are secondary or background as well. And when you're taking, we have this placemat here with different sections for each of the sensory elements that we'll be evaluating. So feel free to take some notes there if you'd like, in each of the sections. And everybody's tastes and smells are different, aromas are different to most people. So don't be afraid if you are tasting something or picking up on something that's different from your neighbor. That's one of the great things about what makes all of us unique. And then also tonight, we have an optional pairing with wine. It's something that we offer at our tasting in Henderson, Nevada. And for the chocolates that we'll be trying tonight, we typically would recommend something like a Pinot Noir or a Sangiovese from Montepulciano or from Tuscany. I've actually got a couple wines here that I want to share with you. This one's actually a French wine. This is from the Vaqueras region in France. And it actually is it's a blend of Grenache grapes, which is a very jammy, juicy, fruit-forward grape, with a few others. But it's a Vaqueras. As you can see, that's the region. And the producer is Pierre-Henri Morel there. And then I've got another wine that's a little bit lower in alcohol. So that's about a 12 to 14%. This is actually 6%. This is something it's really neat. It's a sparkling wine, and it's called Bracchetto d'Acqui. There are a few different producers, but it's kind of like a sparkling rosé. It has a little sweetness to it, but it works really, really well with chocolate. It's one of my favorite pairings to have with chocolate. Like I said, it's a lower alcohol. It's a chilled wine that you put in the fridge for a bit, and then it's lightly sparkling as well. They call that frizzante in Italy. But both of those wines are fantastic with the pieces that we'll be trying tonight. And so I've got a little glass here of some of the Vaqueras wine. And I did hear that there is a birthday out there. So happy birthday to you, and cheers. And we'll get started. So I thought tonight, we'll spend a few minutes talking about where chocolate comes from. And I'll kind of break that process up a little bit so that we'll learn a little bit about chocolate, a few of the process steps. Then we'll go back and we'll switch to tasting some pieces, give our taste buds a break a little bit. Then we'll switch to learning a little bit more about chocolate, and then finish with some pieces. I thought that'd be a nice experience. So, chocolate, we talk about where chocolate comes from. All real chocolate comes from this right here. This is a fresh cocoa pod. This is actually from Ecuador. It's the Nacional variety, but it typically, cocoa only grows typically about 20 degrees north and south of the equator. It requires a really tropical environment. And our FLN chocolate is actually comprised of a blend of specialty premium beans from Ecuador, West Africa, and Brazil. Those make up the beans that make our FLN chocolate. And, when I'm talking about this pod here, this is actually the fruit of the cocoa plant. And if you think about how fruit grows, normally it grows on the branches, of the tree, right? Well, something unique about cocoa is that it does grow on the branch, but also on the trunk of the tree. And you can see that in the photo there. And another thing that's very unique about cocoa is that it doesn't, it typically needs to be harvested by hand by farmers in order to utilize it in the cocoa making process. You can't just kind of wait for that cocoa to fall from the tree. At that point, it'll be too ripe and really not usable, or wouldn't be very good for making chocolate. And so what the farmer needs to do is he needs to understand really, for all of his cocoa, at what stage it's ready to be harvested and what stage it's ripe and ready to be opened. And they'll take the pods down off the tree. They'll use a machete typically. They'll cut all those pods down, kind of gather them up, and then they're going to cut them open. And I'm going to do that actually with you guys here tonight. So this is, like I said, a real cocoa pod. I actually brought this in, had this sent from Ecuador. I'm going to go ahead and use I don't have a machete, but I've got a kitchen knife here. Okay. Slice that. And here we go. So that's what the inside of a cocoa pod looks like. Really neat. Doesn't really look too much like chocolate, right? So let me take this. I'm going to scoop these beans out. And these are actual cocoa beans. There they are. So you can see they have the shape of the pod there. And look at this. This is the shell. See how thick? Look how thick that is. Really, really neat. But again, not really too much like chocolate there, right? So you'll see these beans are covered in a pulp. This is actually pretty sweet. It's a little acidic. It has a flavor that's kind of similar to pineapple and lychee, if you've ever had lychee before. And although it doesn't taste like chocolate, it's actually a very, very important process, or a very important part of the chocolate making process, and that is fermentation. So fermentation is needed to really deliver a lot of fruity and floral notes that are in the chocolate and the cocoa bean itself, kind of waiting to be unlocked. And fermenting, is a process that takes about 7 days. And really what we're doing with that sweet pulp that's on the outside of the bean, that's providing a really a nice environment for bacteria to kind of grow. And what happens is you ferment, and those flavors actually become more concentrated in the bean, and they kind of start drying out a little bit. And what's happening is we're developing flavor. We're developing those complex floral and fruity notes in the bean. And that takes about 7 days for the beans to be fermented properly, depending on the region. You can see here in this photo, this farmer here is kind of mixing up the beans. Those have been fermenting for probably 3 or 4 days. You can see they've started to turn brown. Not a whole lot of white there remaining, starting to kind of oxidize a little bit. All right. And once that is done, now we're going to dry those beans out. So it's really important that we get all of that excess moisture off of the bean because we don't want any mold or anything to grow. So we're going to spread those beans out, and we're going to dry them down to about 7% moisture, give or take. And that's where we'll stop for now, and then we'll move on, let our beans kind of chill out and sun dry a little bit. And now we'll move on to another piece of chocolate. So let's reach down and pick up this guy right here. Looks like it's a nice enrobed. That's another term I used earlier. It means kind of like chocolate coated, or as we'll talk about in a second, there are a couple ways that you can use chocolate to make different pieces. So you can mold, put chocolate into a mold, or you can enrobe, and this is enrobe. It's kind of like a nice waterfall of chocolate that coats the piece here. So this is our milk chocolate satin cream. And you can see here it's covered in milk chocolate with a nice little milk chocolate drizzle. And this piece starts out in our kitchen in Henderson, Nevada. And the way that we make the satin cream centers, we actually start with cream sugar, and we'll heat those up in our copper kettles until they're about 235 degrees, which is the softball stage of sugar candy making. And from there, we're going to take that mixture and we're going to pour it into our cream beaters. And these are really big machines with mixing paddles that kind of mix that syrup. And what it's going to do is it's going to all kind of come down in temperature, and it's going to cool. And while it does that, it's going to crystallize the sugar at the right temperature so that we get a lot of very, very fine sugar crystals. And that's really, really important in making a satin cream center, because it's almost like when you're making a fudge. You don't want to have it taste very crunchy and grainy. You want it to be really silky smooth and fine and melt nicely in your mouth. And so that's how we do our satin cream centers here. So let's pick up this piece. bring it up to our nose and take a deep breath. Getting more of those cocoa notes, some of those roasted milk notes almost, or scalded milk. Kind of like when you heat milk up on the stove, you almost get a little bit of caramelized flavor coming through there, and we're smelling a little bit of that here along with some vanilla. Let's take a bite. See that really smooth, almost fudge-like center there? You get that right away, just smooth chocolate, melting, get some of that sweetness, roasted cocoa coming through. Some of those caramel notes. And there is no caramel in this recipe, but again, because we're heating up that milk and that cream, we kind of develop a little bit of that as we go. And also through another way, something that's kind of unique to our milk chocolates at Ethel, and that's called the oven crumb process. And what that means is basically when we're going to make our milk chocolate, we're going to add milk, obviously. I apologize if you can hear that whistling. It's I live in a building and on a higher floor, and when it gets really windy, the air tends to just run through my place, and it just whistles. So I apologize for that. But anyway, basically with the milk chocolate recipe that we create, we use this oven crumb process. And what that is, we take a little bit of chocolate, some of the milk powder, and the sugar, and we'll actually, under pressure, under a vacuum, kind of caramelize those a little bit. So it develops a really complex caramelized note that will then take those ingredients that have been treated by the crumb oven process, and we'll mix those back into the chocolate. And it really develops a nice complex flavor that I think makes our chocolate very unique and delicious. So back to the piece here. Again, very smooth, some of that caramelized milk coming through. And the chocolate starts to melt really nicely. And get some of those cocoa notes, vanilla coming through. Maybe even a little toasted, some toasted quality as well. Have your wine, swirl your wine a little bit. Tasting wine, I like to kind of, bring a little bit of air in. This is a perfect opportunity. It's okay to slurp a little bit when you're drinking wine. It kind of aerates the wine in your mouth and makes a lot more of those aromatics come out, and a lot more flavorful that way. Taste the wine and kind of see how the flavors are changing and mixing and mingling in your mouth. Depending on how dry or sweet your wine is too, some of those bitterness notes and maybe a little black pepper might be coming through as well, that can provide a nice complexity to the wine or to the overall piece. All right. So capture any notes that you'd like to on that piece there. That was our milk chocolate satin cream. And now let's move on to our dark chocolate piece, our first dark chocolate piece of the night. That will be this guy here, our dark chocolate vanilla satin creams. So this piece, again, follows the satin cream process. So we heat that mixture up to the soft ball stage, 235 degrees. And then we're going to pour it into the cream beater. And then this time, instead of adding chocolate to the center to make our milk chocolate satin cream, we're going to add a 10-fold vanilla extract. So 10-fold means really it's got 10 times the amount of vanilla, the vanilla bean that's actually in that extract, compared to something like a 1-fold or one-time vanilla extract that you'd find like in the grocery store, or a Whole Foods. That's like would be a traditional. So this is 10 times that amount. So it's a really intense, thick, almost like a syrup that will pour into that cream beater. And that cream beater is going to mix all beautifully, get that incorporated throughout. And what we'll have is our vanilla satin cream center that will be covered in dark chocolate to make this piece here. So let's lift it up, smell, maybe rub a little bit. Now you should definitely be getting much different aromas than the last two pieces. Some of those deeper, darker roasted cocoa notes. And if you try, you actually get a little bit of coffee or espresso, and that's something that we'll actually talk about here in a second, how we get those qualities in the cocoa. It's okay to take a minute and kind of just enjoy it. Now, let's take a bite. See that center there? And right away, you'll get that vanilla, just boom. Before anything else happens, vanilla, some of that sweetness. And then a little slower than the last piece, because this is dark chocolate. It's gonna melt a little slower. And it's gonna come in and kind of add a nice, almost like a slight bitterness, complex roasted cocoa note coming in there. Kind of cut that sweetness nicely. Get that vanilla again. Maybe a little bit of what we call citrus blossom. So we actually add a little bit of orange oil to our chocolate that adds a little bit of what we call a citrus blossom note. It's really, really neat and unique with Ethel. Raise our glass here, take a little sip. Kind of swirl it around our mouth. Some of those vanilla compounds too. So something about wine, some wines are actually aged in oak or in wood, and there are natural vanilla notes that are actually in the wood too. So sometimes you'll get some of those in wine, and they'll work quite nicely with this piece as well. All right, capture any notes that you'd like to on that piece. And then we'll move over into one of our more unique chocolate pieces. Talk about this guy right here. This is our dark chocolate prickly pear satin cream. So you can see it's got a really nice, almost like a pyramid with the top cut off there shape. This is a molded piece, as you can tell. And then if you look at it, you say, okay, there's definitely some red, a really nice, almost like a spray of some red on there. And that's a red colored cocoa butter that we use. And our skilled artisans at Ethel will actually take an airbrush and they'll put the colored cocoa butter in there. They'll temper it. We'll talk about tempering in a minute. They'll temper that, and then they'll spray the molds. All of the molds that we use for this piece get sprayed with this beautiful red colored cocoa butter. And then we will deposit the chocolate and the prickly pear center into the piece for it to set up. So something unique about prickly pear. So prickly pear is actually a cactus. Prickly pear cactus are actually, they're native originally to the Americas only. And although you can find them in some other countries and continents today, they are originally just from the Americas. And we actually have them growing in our cactus garden in Henderson, Nevada. And something really neat about the cactus is that it fruits. So it actually will have a little red, you can see on the slide, a little red bulb that will kind of come up. And that is the prickly pear fruit, or tuna, as it's referred to, that red, as you can see there. And what we're gonna do, we'll take that off, we'll take the spines off, and then we're gonna puree that. And that's gonna form the base of this, the center of this piece. So you'll notice when we bite into it, it's a little more liquid, and that's coming from the prickly pear puree that we're added. So it's a different satin cream than some of the last two pieces that we tried. All right, let's lift it up. And again, I like to kind of smell or kind of rub the side if you'd like. And now you should definitely be getting a little bit of a different experience from this one, right? Some of that red fruit should be kind of coming through, almost like a perfumey note, kind of coming through the dark chocolate. And obviously you'll get some of that dark chocolate, some of the cocoa, the espresso notes from the roasted cocoa there. Now let's take a bite. Oh, piece went flying. Look at the center. So you see that pink center there from the prickly pear puree. And then you're gonna have really sweet, juicy, almost like a bubblegum flavor, almost coming from that prickly pear. That's what makes, one of the things that makes that quite unique. A little like a bubblegum. And then, wait for it, and that dark chocolate's gonna come in really nicely again and just cut that sweetness and provide a really complex bitterness note that comes in. Roasted cocoa, espresso, more of that perfumey quality as well. Some raspberry as well, or even like a little guava if you've tried guava before. That's also pretty prominent. And then the aftertaste, you're going to have again some of that perfuminess that's going to remain, and then some of the bitterness from the dark chocolate and the cocoa as well. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of switch over to finish up our cocoa and chocolate making process. We can kind of give our taste buds a break here. I'm gonna have a little bit of water, cleanse my palate a little bit. And next, so if you remember, we left our cocoa beans kind of sun drying. They're getting a little bit of a tan for a few days, kind of hanging out. And before we want to buy them or receive them into the States, we need to sort. We need to look at these beans and really make sure that they're fermented well. And then they meet all of our specifications for high quality cocoa beans before we bag them and send them off to our roasting facility to be roasted. So here, let's see here. I've got a bean here. You can see this has been properly fermented. This is actually a bean. So if you joined us last tasting, this is actually a bean that I had fermenting. I fermented it myself in my kitchen, and I actually just recently I saved some to share with you, and then I actually roasted some as well. So I tried to kind of start making my own chocolate a little bit in the kitchen. It was really quite unique, but we need to sort these beans. We actually have a device that will put the beans on, and then we'll slice it in half. So every bean gets cut in half, just kind of like how I shared with you there. And we'll look at the beans, and we'll want to make sure that there's a nice even fermentation throughout all of the bean. And that means that we have developed all of those delicious fruity and floral notes. And that's when we'll ship them off to our roasting facility in Pennsylvania, and we're going to roast those beans, right? So fermentation and roast are the two primary drivers of flavor in cocoa. And just like coffee is roasted to different levels of roast, you've got a blonde, light roast, you got a medium roast, and a dark roast. We're going to do something very similar with cocoa, depending on the specification or the recipe that we are going to make. So here, I've got some roasted cocoa beans right here, and I'm gonna pick a couple here. So you'll see, here's the roasted bean, and then you see that skin there. So that's actually cracked kind of naturally with the roasting process, but this skin, we don't really want that. Okay, so we're gonna take that skin off, and this is what we're left with right here. This is called the cocoa nib. And I've actually got some here. This will kind of just break up really naturally. So if I just kind of like touch it a little bit, see it kind of just breaks up in my hand like that. So here's some cocoa nibs right there. And these are really, these are actually like the purest form of chocolate. You can sprinkle these over ice cream, adds a little nice textural, chocolate note, or I've done it into salads, sometimes as well. But it's really nice, and like I said, it's really the purest form of chocolate. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these nibs and we're going to grind them. And the nibs themselves are about 50% fat, and so when we grind them, we're going to liquefy and actually start making what looks like and tastes like actual chocolate. So you'll see here, this is one way that we grind here. And, we grind everything down. We want to get a really smooth mouthfeel and, really get that particle size down so it's really nice and silky smooth in our mouth. And this is where, you know, if we're going to make, actually for our milk chocolate satin cream piece here, the center of this, we'll actually take just the straight ground nibs, or what we call 100% unsweetened chocolate, or chocolate liquor. That's an industry term. There's no alcohol in it, but it's just what we refer to as 100% unsweetened chocolate. We'll actually take that and we will use that in the center of our satin cream, because we already have the sugar and some of the fat, some of the butter. And so we just need that chocolate in there to really give us that intense aroma and flavor. And so we'll use that. But if we're going to make a dark chocolate or a milk chocolate, we're going to, at this stage, we'll add in, you know, our other ingredients: milk, some sugar, vanilla, you know, whatever it is that we're making, and the percentages that we want to use to create that finished chocolate. And that takes a number of hours depending on the recipe. And after that, you know, we have to do something else. We have to do something called temper the chocolate. So as some of you may know, you know, if you've ever left chocolate in your car on a hot day, or melted maybe some chocolate in the microwave, you want to dip some strawberries or something, you may have noticed when the chocolate set up again or recrystallized, you noticed it kind of looked dull. It didn't look very appealing. You know, maybe there are some chocolates you can buy in the craft store that have some other vegetable fats in them that you can melt, and they will set up, but they don't really taste that great. Real chocolate, 100% chocolate, or you know, chocolate made from the cocoa pod only, needs to be tempered in order to look like this and to have a beautifully glossy appearance, a shine, shimmer to it. And something that we'll notice in a second when we bite into it, it will have an audible snap to it as well. And you'll be able to hear that with one of the final pieces that we taste. And that's, you know, one of the great, you know, one of the attributes and characteristics of really well-tempered and premium chocolate. And so we need to temper that. And what that does is it, you know, takes the cocoa butter, which the cocoa butter crystals. The cocoa butter is the fat that's found in the cocoa bean and in chocolate. And we kind of, you know, crystallize that in a way so that it's a very stable form of those cocoa butter crystals. And we do that through a very specific heating and cooling of the chocolate. We heat it up to typically about 108 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to drop it down to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we'll drop it down a little further to about 86 or 88 degrees. And then we'll increase the temperature just slightly. All of that kind of allows the cocoa to go through different phases of crystallization. It really develops that most stable form that will look like the delicious glossy pieces that you see in front of you. And you'll see here in this final photo, that's actually our vanilla satin cream, so the piece we tried a few minutes ago, going through our enrober. So it's kind of like a delicious chocolate waterfall of dark chocolate there. Every piece gets covered, every nook and cranny gets covered in chocolate, and then comes through. We have a little fan that'll blow off the excess, and then it'll get deposited onto our conveyor belt and cool perfectly in our cooling tunnel before it's packaged and sold to you, our wonderful customers. So, you know, that's just a few slides that are kind of, you know, generalized a bit the process of making chocolate. But I hope all of you, you know, had a chance to learn something there. It's a really, really complex process, and I love being able to talk about it, you know, in my everyday life and job. So, hope you all enjoyed that. And I think it's time to get back to the chocolates. So let's move on to this guy right here. This piece might look a little similar to something we tried earlier, the first piece we tried tonight. And that's because it's the dark chocolate version of that piece. So this is our dark chocolate raspberry satin cream. So you can see here, it's kind of the opposite of what we had earlier. So now we've got a beautiful dark chocolate enrobed piece with a milk chocolate drizzle on the top. Bring it up to our nose and smell. Get some of that roasted cocoa. Again, those deeper, darker roasted cocoa notes, almost like espresso or coffee notes coming through. Take a bite. Really nice, bright red. Get that tart raspberry right away. Kind of take our tongue, and I like to press it up against the roof of my mouth a little bit. Kind of get that dark chocolate starting to melt. And it comes in. And again, it cuts that sweetness really nicely. Take a sip of wine here. I love the way the chocolate, just the way that the wine will actually kind of change, you know, tasting one thing in your mouth, oh, this is wonderful, tart raspberry, bitter chocolate. And the wine comes in and just kind of like throws things on their side a little bit and gives you a whole nother perspective on the chocolate. It's really, really neat. And we actually are going to be doing a tasting with beer coming up too. So I'm really, really excited about that as well. It'll be a little bit different. So hopefully with this piece, you know, try those, you know, those tart raspberry notes, fruit notes coming in, some of that perfuminess from the raspberry too, and then that citrus blossom that we talked about from the orange oil. Some vanilla as well. And the aftertaste, you should have, you know, just a little bit of bitterness, maybe some sweetness from the raspberry, you know, but that dark chocolate is really complex. It's going to leave, you know, just a little bit of bitterness and kind of leave us lingering bitterness in our mouth as well. All right. Capture any notes that you'd like to there. And then I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get kind of sad. I think we're down to our last piece of chocolate here, but this is actually my favorite of the classic pieces. And the reason we say classic, this is one of the original recipes, 16 recipes that Ethel created in her kitchen and pieces that we launched with Ethel M back in 1981. And this is our lemon satin cream. And you can tell it's a molded piece, beautiful oval shape there with a lemon leaf on top. There's that whistling again. So this one, you know, before I talked about how we made the satin cream centers, you know, we heat that syrup up and then we cool it in the cream beater. And this time, instead of adding raspberry or vanilla, we're gonna add lemon puree. So we add that in at the final step in the process. Everything caramel or kind of crystallizes together. And then we use something called the single shot depositor to actually deposit that into the mold. So in one shot, you've got the center and the shell being deposited into the mold, and then the mold will move down and cool properly. It's a really unique, really kind of cool technology to see. And if you ever visit us in Henderson, you know, we have plexiglass or glass walls lining our retail store that you can see into the factory. You can actually see all these pieces being made. Something really cool and unique about Ethel M. So let's pick it up. Smell a little bit. Now this one, I would say out of all the dark chocolate pieces, this is probably going to be the most, like you'll get the most aroma from this one. This probably has I think out of most of our pieces, the thickest dark chocolate shell on this piece. There's the most amount of dark chocolate. You'll see why in a second. Smell that guy. Again, deeper, darker roasted cocoa notes. Maybe a little bit of lemon coming through there. Not too much, maybe a little floral. Now remember, when we bite this, we want to listen for the snap, okay? Okay. You'll see the center there. Tart, your mouth kind of suck in a little bit. Get that tartness from the lemon. Kind of swirl that, press it up against the roof of your mouth. And then the dark chocolate is just like really almost like encompasses that whole lemon in a rich, velvety dark chocolate. some of those roasted cocoa. Again, some of that orange blossom coming through. Vanilla. Sip of wine here. This one, if you have an opportunity to try the brachetto, this piece here, this lemon, I think pairs one. I mean, I think the best pairing with the lemon or with the brachetto is the lemon piece. If you have an opportunity in the future, this also is awesome as well. So the aftertaste with this one, we're gonna have, this is actually what I would consider probably the longest aftertaste of any of the pieces. And that's why one of the reasons why we hold it for the last piece. You know, you'll find that, you know, after we answer some questions, you'll still kind of think, I'm still tasting that dark chocolate in my mouth. And that's something, you know, really, really neat about this piece and the dark chocolate we have at Ethel is that it kind of sticks with us for a bit longer. So it's almost like you're getting a second chance to try it as well. So, all right, well, that was our last piece that we have to share tonight. But what I'd like to do, hopefully everybody really enjoyed the tasting tonight. You know, I love having the opportunity to come in front of you folks and, you know, really share my passion with chocolate with all of you. And I hope you all are enjoying it as well. I think what we'll do now, we'll put a little poll up, and I would love for you guys to vote on your favorite piece that you tried tonight. Go ahead and place your vote there. And then I think what we'll do after is we'll take some questions. If you've written in some questions, I'll try to answer those for you. And then we may be able to actually reach out to some folks as well. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask. Hopefully everybody's voting. In the comments too. Yep, sorry, go ahead.
While we're waiting for the poll, I wanted to tell you and just announce to everyone, we have a couple of special occasions on the Zoom party with us tonight. We have a birthday being celebrated by Kevin J. So happy birthday to you.
Kevin, happy birthday.
And then we have an engagement party on the line. We have Dad's engagement.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is amazing. Well, cheers to both of you guys, or all you guys, I guess. Wow, that's excellent. I'm really floored to be able to share this evening with you all. So thank you. And thank you for making us a part of your wonderful day. All right, it looks like.
Great. So Mark, I'm going to come back on. It looks like it's finished, and the dark chocolate lemon satin cream was the favorite. So the one that's
snuck out there
right now, that looks like it's the majority favorite. So Mark, I do have several questions for you as we've been going along.
Okay.
The one thing I wanted to say to everybody on the panel still is that we're going to try something different tonight too. So while I've got these questions from the Q&A, we are going to try to take a couple of you over audio and see how that works out. So raise your hand. There's the button at the bottom about raise your hand. And Stu, who is another one of our colleagues here, who's behind the scenes, he's going to be combing through those and taking a few questions. But in the meantime, Mark, I have a couple here that have come in tonight. The first is, what happens to the rest of the chocolate that is left over in the enrobing process?
So the okay, good. So the enrober, the machine, it's an enrobing machine, and we have, there's different sizes depending on the lines where we're making everything, but it's a closed, system. So what happens basically is we put the chocolate in, we'll temper it, and then it's going to get kind of, we'll filter back, and it'll come over the chocolate, make that chocolate waterfall, and then it'll come out the bottom, and it'll go through a filter and kind of recirculate. It may, depending on the unit, some of them will actually retemper the chocolate and then recirculate to go back over the next piece. So we don't lose any of the chocolate in that process.
I know, I love that about it. Okay, the next question is coming from a gentleman or a woman, I'm not sure which. As a baking and pastry student, how do you get the vanilla cream to be so white?
So when we make that satin cream center, you know, we're heating the syrup up, like I said, at 235 degrees. And when we cool it, you know, when you crystallize all of that down, you know, it's really important to pay attention to your temperatures when you're doing that. So typically, I think we typically let it cool down to about 100, 110 degrees Fahrenheit, just a little warmer than body temperature. And then we're going to start to mix that and crystallize everything. And that's going to be at the right temperature so that those sugar crystals get really, really nice and small, and everything will start to kind of come together and have a really nice white appearance. And so that's one piece. The second piece, so temperature, making sure your temperatures are right. And the second is, you know, because we use a 10-fold vanilla, like I said, it's 10 times the amount of vanilla beans or vanilla solids that are in there. We don't have to use, you know, nearly as much as we would have to use if we were to use, you know, like a standard vanilla extract or something to that effect. So we're using a smaller amount. And that cream beater, you know, that's going to take that vanilla and really mix it thoroughly and evenly and get it incorporated throughout the piece. So those are, I would say, the two reasons why they stay nice and white.
Great. Mark, we had a lot of people coming in from the beginning just saying that you went too fast through the wines, and they wanted to see if you could recommend those specific
sure.
wines again.
Absolutely. So the first here is a Vacheras. So this is a region in France. It's similar like in the Rhone area. And this is actually, so this is a Vacheras, and the primary grape type in this is Grenache. So European wines can be a little confusing sometimes. They don't put the actual grape type on the front of the wine. They use the region that the wine is produced in or the grapes are grown in. But this one is a Grenache, but it's the Vacheras, and the producer is Pierre-Henri Morel. And the second is an Italian. This is a Bracchetto de Acqui. And again, this is a lower 6%, lightly sparkling red wine, or it's kind of more like a rosé. But this is one of my favorite, you know, summertime too, because it's a chilled wine that works really well. And there are a number of producers of this, and you know, the Grenache as well. As I said, you know, the last few tastings we've had, I think I've got, I had a Pinot Noir from the Russian River Valley in California that was also amazing. That was called Failla, F-A-I-L-L-A. And then we also had a complicated Pinot Noir that's also from Sonoma Coast in California. So the complicated is actually one that we use in our tasting in our factory store in Henderson, you know, as well. So that's obviously a wonderful pairing. So I hope with each of these, I'll kind of select a different wine to give you all an experience to try something a little different.
Great. So I'm going to turn this over really quick to see, did we have anyone come in that wants to speak live?
Yes. So, hey, everybody, this is Stu coming in from behind the scenes. And let me just be the first to say, Mark and Lisa, you guys did a fantastic job tonight. Just wonderful. We've had several raised hands, but we only have time for a couple of questions. So we're going to actually start with Jeff T. Jeff, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and allow you to talk, and you're going to get a little notification. And so just please, let's keep our questions as short as possible so that we can get to as many as we can. But Jeff, we're going to go ahead and let you go. So I just sent you the capability, and if you can go ahead and ask your question. Jeff, I see you unmuted. Are you able to ask your question? All right, going once, going twice. We're We're gonna move on. We've got a few more. Sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff.
All right, we're gonna move on to Lori N. Lori, we're gonna send you the ability to talk. You should get a little pop-up. All right, Lori, I've sent it over to you. Feel free to ask away if you're ready to go.
Okay, hopefully you can hear. What temperature are the chocolates stored at, and how long does FLM keep them on the shelf?
Very good question. So the question, and hopefully everybody heard it, how long what temperature the chocolates are stored at, and how long do we keep them on the shelf? So the first, with chocolate, so as I said before, tempering, that's a process that occurs typically between 84 to 86, 88 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when the chocolate's still liquid. That's for tempering. When it sets up and forms the finished chocolate piece, typically I recommend, between like what you'd consider maybe cellar temperature, so 55 or between, I would say maybe 60 and 70 degrees, 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really the best, environment. And then also you don't want it to be too humid. Water or humidity in chocolate do not work well together. And so, you want your humidity typically to be 50% or less humidity on that. And then FLM chocolates on the shelf. So, as many of you know, our FLM pieces, the majority of which, have a shelf life of less than 90 days. And, that's because of the fresh ingredients that we use, real, fresh cream, butter. I mentioned before the vanilla and the raspberries, and, because of that, they're only typically, I would say by the time they're on the shelf, less than 2 months, I would say normally. But if you look at the back of your box, you'll actually see here a little, you may not be able to see it there, but a stamp with a best before date. And that's really what we recommend, is that you enjoy your chocolates before that date. But because, they are made, very fresh, it's best to consume them, as soon after you buy them as you can.
Lori, that was a fantastic question. Thank you so much for posing that to us. You were officially the first person, by the way, to ever ask a live audio question during a virtual chocolate tasting. So well done. Thank you. We've got a couple more hands raised. I know we're running a little bit low on time, but we're going to go to Joe. And it's just Joe, so hopefully there's not a lot of Joes out there, but there's only one Joe with his hand raised. So Joe, I'm going to allow you to talk now, and hopefully you get the pop-up, and you can unmute and go ahead and pose your question. All right, I think we may have lost Joe.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's okay. We got a couple more.
Okay.
Let's go to BJ Koros. BJ, we're gonna give you the ability to talk here.
Yes. How soon will you guys be opening? By the way, thanks. This has been amazing. Really, you do a 4th of July. Let's see blueberries that we've got the red, white, and blue going on.
That would be great. Yeah, we're sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I can't talk about a lot of the new products that we're working on, but that may be something that we're looking into in the near future.
Great. When will Henderson be open for the actual tastings themselves?
So do you want me to take that, Mark?
Sure.
So the factory store and Cactus Garden will be opening this Tuesday, the 26th at 10 a.m. But we will not be opening the tasting room just because of social distancing at this time. So I would just say, BJ, stay tuned to our social media and our website for updates on that. But we will continue doing virtual tastings.
Awesome. And last but not least, how many more programs after the next 2 that you have scheduled will you continue the virtuals? Because these are incredible.
Awesome. As of right now, I think those are the only 2 we've scheduled, but I'm fairly confident we're going to be holding these to the foreseeable future as well. So I would say, stay tuned on FLM.com or watch your email for future dates. And if you have ideas too as well in the survey, if there are pieces that maybe you want to try, or maybe a selection of pieces that you'd like for us to do a tasting on, go ahead and capture those and write those in for us. We love getting your feedback. And actually, some of the feedback we received on previous tastings was to kind of get to some of the chocolate a little sooner, because folks were, wanting to get into that delicious chocolate. So we hope tonight we change things up a little bit, and we hope that worked out well for you all. But yeah, any comments and questions you have, feedback, feel free to capture that, and we'll do our best to review it and act on it.
EJ, thanks again so much. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful holiday weekend.
You as well. Safe.
Thanks, guys. So it is officially a little bit over our planned time. So I know there's a couple of things to wrap up with, but thank you so much for both of our first 2 audio questions during virtual tastings.
Yeah, so I think the last thing just to cover off on, if you can see on your screen, if there's a piece you've fallen in love with, or if there's a tasting you think a friend would like, we are offering 20% off, and there's no minimum on that order. If you go to slm.com by this Sunday, May 24th, and use promo code virtual. So again, you can use that on tastings or any product you may have fallen in love with, and we hope to see you on a future tasting soon. Excellent. Thank you all very much for joining, and hope everybody has a wonderful holiday weekend, and I'll see you guys next time. Night, everyone. Have a safe weekend.